Park ranger finds secret military cache in forest, then uncovers shocking Cold War conspiracy that changes everything. Jack Thornton had always been drawn to the wilderness. Growing up in a small town nestled at the foot of the Cascade Mountains, he spent his childhood exploring the dense forests and rugged terrain that surrounded his home. Now at 35, Jack worked as a park ranger, dedicating his life to preserving the natural beauty he held so dear. With piercing blue eyes that seemed to reflect the sky and a beard as wild as the forest he loved, Jack cut an imposing figure. His weathered hands told stories of countless trails blazed and campfires tended. Despite his gruff exterior, those who knew him well spoke of his gentle nature and unwavering commitment to the land and its wildlife. Jack's passion for hiking went beyond his professional duties. On his days off, he would venture deep into the less traveled parts of the forest, seeking solitude and new discoveries. These solo expeditions were his form of meditation, a way to reconnect with the earth and clear his mind of the stresses that came with his job. Recently, Jack had been troubled by increasing reports of illegal logging and poaching in the area. He felt a personal responsibility to protect the forest and its inhabitants, often lying awake at night, strategizing ways to catch those responsible. This weight on his shoulders only fueled his desire to escape into the wilderness whenever possible. As autumn painted the forest in vibrant hues of red and gold, Jack prepared for what he hoped would be his most ambitious hike yet. He had stumbled upon an old map that hinted at a long-forgotten trail, one that supposedly led to a secluded valley untouched by modern civilization. The prospect of exploring this uncharted territory filled him with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Little did Jack know that this hike would lead him to a discovery that would change not only his life, but the lives of many others. As he laced up his well-worn boots and adjusted his backpack, he couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary awaited him in the depths of the forest. With a deep breath, Jack stepped out of his cabin and into the crisp morning air, ready to embark on a journey that would test his skills, challenge his beliefs, and ultimately redefine his purpose in ways he could never have imagined. The sun had barely crested the eastern ridge when Jack set out on his expedition. The air was crisp, carrying the earthy scent of decaying leaves and pine needles. As he ventured deeper into the forest, the familiar trails gave way to overgrown paths and unmarked terrain. Jack relied on his years of experience and the old map he had discovered to guide him through the increasingly dense undergrowth. Hours passed, and the forest seemed to grow thicker with each step. The canopy above blocked out much of the sunlight, creating a twilight world of shadows and muted colors. Jack's muscles ached from the strenuous hike, but his determination pushed him forward. He was certain he was on the right track to the hidden valley. As the day wore on, Jack began to notice subtle changes in his surroundings. The vegetation took on unfamiliar forms, and the air grew heavy with an almost tangible sense of history. Moss-covered rocks bore strange markings that hinted at long-forgotten stories. Jack's excitement grew. He felt he was on the verge of something significant. It was late afternoon when Jack stumbled upon a small clearing. Exhausted, he decided to take a break and refill his water bottle from a nearby stream. As he knelt by the water's edge, a glint of metal caught his eye. Intrigued, Jack moved closer to investigate. Pushing aside a curtain of vines, Jack gasped at what lay before him. Half buried in the soft earth and wrapped in the forest's embrace was the rusted hulk of an old military truck. Its olive-drab paint had long since faded, and nature had begun to reclaim it, with saplings growing through the deteriorated floor and vines entangling the chassis. Jack's mind raced with questions. How had this vehicle ended up so deep in the forest, far from any known roads or trails? It looked to be at least several decades old, possibly dating back to World War II or the Korean War. The truck's presence here was an enigma, one that both excited and unsettled him. Cautiously, Jack approached the vehicle. Years of exposure to the elements had taken their toll, but the truck's basic structure remained intact. As he circled around to the back, Jack noticed that the canvas covering was still partially in place, sagging with the weight of accumulated debris. With his heart pounding, Jack reached out to pull back the rotting canvas. The material crumbled at his touch, revealing the truck's cargo area. What he saw inside made him stumble backward, his breath catching in his throat. The truck was filled with wooden crates, their surfaces etched with faded military markings. Some had split open, spilling their contents onto the rusted floor. Jack's eyes widened as he recognized the unmistakable shapes of old firearms, ammunition, and what appeared to be explosives. This was no ordinary transport vehicle. It was a mobile arsenal, hidden away in the heart of the forest. Jack's mind whirled with the implications of his discovery. Why was this cache of weapons hidden here? Were they still dangerous after all these years? And perhaps most importantly, who else might know about this secret buried in the wilderness? As the initial shock wore off, Jack's training kicked in. He knew he couldn't leave this find unreported. The weapons, even in their deteriorated state, posed a significant risk. Moreover, this discovery could be of historical importance, possibly shedding light on classified military operations from decades past. With shaking hands, Jack reached for his satellite phone. He had brought it for emergencies, never imagining he'd use it for something like this. As he dialed the number for his supervisor, Jack cast another glance at the truck. The forest had kept this secret for so long, but now its silence was broken. He knew that from this moment on, nothing would be the same. For him, for the forest he loved, or for the unknown soldiers who had left this deadly cargo behind. As the phone began to ring, Jack took a deep breath, preparing himself for the conversation that would set in motion a chain of events beyond anything he could have anticipated when he set out on this hike. The peaceful solitude of the forest was about to be shattered, and Jack found himself at the center of a mystery decades in the making. As Jack waited for his supervisor to answer, his mind raced through the possibilities of what this discovery could mean. The phone clicked, and a gruff voice answered. "Ranger Station, this is Mike." "Mike, it's Jack," he said, his voice tense. "I found something out here. Something big." Over the next few minutes, Jack described his discovery in detail, his words tumbling out in a rush of excitement and concern. Mike listened intently, asking pointed questions about the truck's condition and the state of its cargo. As Jack finished his account, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Jack," Mike finally said, his tone grave, "what you've stumbled upon could be incredibly significant. I need you to stay put. I'm calling in some specialists. Whatever you do, don't touch anything else." As Jack ended the call, the full weight of his discovery began to sink in. He sat on a fallen log, his eyes fixed on the rusted truck, and waited. The forest, which had always been a source of comfort, now seemed to close in around him, its secrets suddenly palpable. Hours passed, and the sun began to dip below the horizon when Jack heard the distant thrum of helicopter rotors. Soon, the clearing was bathed in artificial light as a military helicopter touched down, kicking up a swirl of leaves and debris. Men in uniform poured out, their faces set in grim determination. Among them was a silver-haired man who approached Jack with purposeful strides. "Ranger Thornton, I'm Colonel Bradshaw, U.S. Army Special Operations. We need you to show us exactly what you found." As Jack led the team to the truck, he noticed the mix of anticipation and apprehension on their faces. Colonel Bradshaw examined the vehicle and its contents, his expression unreadable. After a thorough inspection, he turned to Jack. "Mr. Thornton, what you've discovered here is a piece of forgotten history. This truck was part of a classified operation during the Cold War, codenamed Operation Shadowfall. It was meant to establish hidden caches of weapons across remote areas, preparing for a potential Soviet invasion that never came." Jack's mind reeled at the revelation. But why here? And why was it left behind? The colonel's face darkened. The operation was scrapped abruptly in 1962 for reasons that remain classified. Some caches were retrieved, but others, like this one, were abandoned. The records were sealed, and over time, the locations were lost. As the team began to secure the area and prepare for a more extensive operation, Jack found himself grappling with the implications of his discovery. The forest he thought he knew so well had been harboring this explosive secret for decades. It was a stark reminder that even the most remote wilderness could bear the imprints of human conflict and fear. Colonel Bradshaw placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "Your discovery here, it's going to change a lot of things." We'll need your help in the coming days to make sure this operation goes smoothly." Jack nodded, understanding that his role had suddenly expanded far beyond that of a simple park ranger. As he watched the military team work, he realized that his connection to this forest had deepened in ways he never expected. The wilderness had shared its secret with him, and now he was bound to it more tightly than ever before. As the military operation unfolded around him, Jack found himself at a crossroads. His discovery had thrust him into a world far removed from the tranquil forests he had dedicated his life to protecting. The weight of the situation pressed down on him, demanding a decision that would shape not only his future, but potentially the future of the entire region. Colonel Bradshaw had made it clear that Jack's expertise would be invaluable to the operation. His intimate knowledge of the terrain, combined with his status as the initial discoverer, put him in a unique position. The military wanted him to stay on as a liaison and guide, helping them locate any other potential cache sites and navigate the complex ecosystem of the forest. On the surface, the decision seemed simple. Cooperating fully with the military operation was the responsible thing to do. It would ensure the safe removal of dangerous weapons and possibly prevent them from falling into the wrong hands. Yet, as Jack pondered his options, a nagging doubt began to grow in the back of his mind. He thought about the delicate balance of the forest ecosystem, how years of careful conservation efforts could be undone by a large-scale military operation. The noise, the vehicles, the constant human presence, all of it could have devastating effects on the wildlife he had sworn to protect. Moreover, once word got out about the discovery, would this pristine wilderness become a hotspot for treasure hunters and conspiracy theorists? After a sleepless night spent tossing and turning in his cabin, Jack made his decision. He would cooperate with the military, but on his terms. He would be the voice for the forest, ensuring that the operation was conducted with as little environmental impact as possible. The next morning, Jack approached Colonel Bradshaw with his proposal. "I'll help you," he said, his voice firm, "but we do this my way. We use minimally invasive techniques, we respect wildlife habitats, and we keep this as quiet as possible. This forest has kept these secrets for decades. We owe it to the land to treat it with respect." The colonel's face remained impassive as he considered Jack's words. After a moment, he nodded. "Agreed, Mr. Thornton. Your conditions are reasonable, and frankly, your cooperation is too valuable to risk losing. We'll do this your way." With the agreement in place, Jack threw himself into the operation. He worked tirelessly, guiding the military teams through the forest, helping them identify potential cache sites based on his understanding of the terrain and the old map he had found. His insistence on environmental protection often clashed with the military's desire for efficiency. But slowly, a mutual respect began to grow between Jack and the soldiers. As the days turned into weeks, the consequences of Jack's decision began to manifest. The operation, despite their best efforts, couldn't remain entirely secret. Rumors spread through nearby towns, and soon, curious onlookers and amateur sleuths began to appear at the edges of the forest, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious military activities. Jack found himself in the uncomfortable position of having to turn away fellow hikers and nature enthusiasts from areas he had once encouraged them to explore. The strain began to show on his face, and he noticed the questioning looks from his fellow rangers who had been kept in the dark about the true nature of the operation. The wildlife, too, felt the impact of the increased human presence. Jack observed changes in animal behavior, noting with a heavy heart how some species seemed to be retreating deeper into the forest, away from their usual habitats. He redoubled his efforts to minimize the operation's footprint, often working late into the night to devise alternative strategies that would allow them to continue their work while protecting the forest's delicate balance. As the operation progressed, Jack's reputation in the community began to change. Some saw him as a hero, the local man who had uncovered a piece of hidden history. Others viewed him with suspicion, believing he had sold out to the military and was helping them exploit the forest. The conflicting perceptions weighed heavily on Jack, testing his resolve and making him question whether he had made the right choice. Despite the challenges, Jack remained committed to his decision. He knew that his involvement was crucial in preventing even greater damage to the forest he loved. Each cache they safely removed was a victory, not just for national security, but for the long-term preservation of the wilderness. One evening, as Jack watched the sun set over the forest from his cabin porch, Colonel Bradshaw joined him. "You know, Thornton," he said quietly, "I didn't understand your attachment to this place at first. But seeing it through your eyes, working alongside you, I get it now. What you're doing here, it's important. More important than you probably realize." Jack nodded silently, feeling a mix of pride and sadness. He had made his choice, and for better or worse, he would see it through to the end. As the last light faded from the sky, Jack reaffirmed his commitment to protecting the forest, no matter the personal cost. The path ahead was uncertain, but he was determined to walk it with the same dedication that had guided him throughout his life. As the military operation continued, a secondary plot began to unfold in the small town nearest to the forest. Lisa Chen, a local journalist for the town's newspaper, had caught wind of the unusual activities in the woods. Intrigued by the sudden influx of military personnel and the tight-lipped behavior of the local rangers, Lisa decided to investigate. At first, her inquiries were met with polite but firm deflections. The official story, that it was a routine training exercise, didn't add up. Lisa's journalistic instincts told her there was more to the story, and she was determined to uncover the truth. Her investigation led her to interview local hikers and nature enthusiasts who had been turned away from their favorite trails. Many spoke of a change in Jack Thornton, the once friendly ranger who now seemed stressed and evasive. Lisa's interest was piqued. Jack had always been a well-respected figure in the community, known for his dedication to the forest and his openness with visitors. As Lisa dug deeper, she began to piece together fragments of information. Whispered conversations in the local diner about strange trucks in the forest, theories about hidden government facilities, and rumors of a significant historical discovery all added fuel to her investigative fire. One breakthrough came when Lisa managed to track down an elderly resident, Mr. Harris, who had worked in the area during the Cold War. Over a cup of coffee in his small apartment, Mr. Harris hinted at secret government operations from decades ago. They were preparing for the worst, he said, his aged eyes distant with memory. Hiding things in the forest, things they hoped they'd never need to use. Lisa's story was beginning to take shape, but she needed more. She decided to confront Jack directly, hoping that their past friendly interactions would encourage him to open up. Tracking him down proved difficult, but she finally caught up with him as he was leaving the ranger station late one evening. "Jack," she called out, hurrying to catch up with him. "We need to talk. What's really going on in the forest?" Jack's face was a mask of conflict. He respected Lisa and had always appreciated her fair reporting on environmental issues. But now, bound by his agreement with the military and his own sense of duty, he found himself in an impossible position. "Lisa, I can't discuss this," he said, his voice strained. "Please, for your own sake and for the good of the community, let this go." But Lisa was not so easily deterred. "People have a right to know what's happening in their own backyard, Jack. If there's something dangerous out there, something historical, don't you think the public should be informed?" Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Colonel Bradshaw, who had been watching the interaction from a distance. "Miss Chen, is it?" he said, his tone polite but firm. "I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to cease this line of inquiry. It's a matter of national security." As Lisa opened her mouth to protest, the colonel handed her his card. "If you have any questions, please direct them through official channels. Good evening." With that, he guided Jack away, leaving Lisa standing alone in the parking lot, her mind racing with new questions and theories. This encounter only strengthened Lisa's resolve. She knew she was onto something big, something that could potentially be the story of her career. But as she delved deeper into her investigation, she began to realize the complex ethical implications of exposing this secret. Would revealing the truth about the weapons cache bring closure to a historical mystery, or would it potentially endanger the community and the delicate ecosystem of the forest? As Lisa grappled with these questions, her investigation began to intersect with Jack's efforts in unexpected ways, setting the stage for a conflict between the public's right to know and the need for secrecy in matters of national security. In the weeks that followed, Jack found himself increasingly drawn into Lisa's orbit. Despite his initial reluctance to engage with her, he couldn't help but admire her tenacity and genuine concern for the community and the forest. Their encounters, once tense and guarded, began to take on a different tone. One evening, as Jack was finishing up a long day of guiding military personnel through a particularly challenging section of the forest, he found Lisa waiting for him at the trailhead. Instead of launching into questions about the operation, she simply offered him a thermos of hot coffee. "Thought you could use this," she said with a small smile. "You look exhausted." Jack accepted the thermos gratefully, and for a moment they stood in companionable silence, watching the sun set over the trees. It was Lisa who finally broke the silence. "You know, Jack, I'm not just after a story here," she said softly. "I care about this place too. I've seen how much it means to you, to everyone in town. I just want to understand what's happening." Jack felt his defenses start to crumble. He turned to look at Lisa, really seeing her for the first time in weeks. The determination in her eyes was tempered with genuine concern and something else, a warmth that made Jack's heart skip a beat. "It's complicated, Lisa," he sighed. "I want to tell you everything, but I can't, not without putting a lot of people at risk, including you." Lisa nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I get it. But maybe you don't have to tell me everything. Maybe we can just talk, off the record. Not about the operation, but about you, about why this forest means so much to you." And so began a series of clandestine meetings between Jack and Lisa. They would meet at the edge of the forest, sometimes talking for hours about their lives, their hopes, and their shared love for the natural world. Jack found himself opening up about his childhood, his decision to become a ranger, and the deep connection he felt to the wilderness. Lisa, in turn, shared her passion for journalism, her dream of making a difference through her writing, and her growing conflict over the story she was pursuing. As they grew closer, the lines between professional interest and personal connection began to blur. Their developing relationship did not go unnoticed. Colonel Bradshaw observed their interactions with a mixture of concern and understanding. He pulled Jack aside one day after a particularly long strategy session. "Thornton," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind, "I hope you know what you're doing with that reporter. She's smart, and she's getting closer to the truth. Your personal feelings can't compromise this operation." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of his divided loyalties. "I understand, sir. But I also think Lisa could be an asset. She has the trust of the community. If we bring her in, control the narrative, it could help ease tensions in town." The colonel considered this for a moment before responding. "It's risky, but you might be right. Think it over carefully, Thornton. If you decide to trust her, it's on you to make sure that trust isn't misplaced." As Jack mulled over the colonel's words, he realized that his feelings for Lisa had grown into something more than just friendship. The thought of betraying her trust felt like a physical pain, yet the responsibility he felt towards the operation and the forest was equally powerful. One night, as they sat together on a fallen log, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk, Jack made a decision. He turned to Lisa, his heart pounding. "Lisa, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "But before I do, I need to know that I can trust you completely. Not just as a journalist, but as someone who's become important to me." Lisa's eyes widened. Understanding the magnitude of what Jack was offering, she reached out and took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "You can trust me, Jack," she said softly. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." As Jack began to speak, sharing the truth he'd been guarding for weeks, he felt a mixture of relief and trepidation. He knew that this moment would change everything. For the operation, for his relationship with Lisa, and for the future of the forest he had sworn to protect. The fragile balance that Jack had been maintaining between his duty to the military operation, his commitment to protecting the forest, and his growing relationship with Lisa was suddenly shattered one stormy night. A torrential downpour had been battering the forest for hours, causing small landslides and flooding in areas where the military had been conducting their searches. Jack had been working tirelessly with the teams to secure equipment and ensure everyone's safety when an urgent call came through on his radio. "Thornton, we've got a situation at Site C." Colonel Bradshaw's voice crackled through the static. "The rains exposed another cache, but the ground's unstable. We need you here now." Jack's heart raced as he made his way to Site C, fighting against the wind and rain. As he arrived, he saw a scene of chaos. A section of hillside had collapsed, revealing a hidden bunker. Military personnel were scrambling to secure the area, but the continuing rain was making their efforts nearly impossible. As Jack approached, he could see that the exposed cache was in danger of sliding further down the hill, potentially breaking open and spilling its deadly contents into a nearby stream, a stream that fed directly into the town's water supply. "We need to secure that cache now," Colonel Bradshaw shouted over the storm, "or we're looking at an environmental disaster." Jack surveyed the scene, his ranger's instincts kicking in. He quickly formulated a plan, directing the teams to create a makeshift barrier using fallen trees and their own equipment. As they worked frantically against time and nature, Jack noticed movement at the edge of the clearing. To his horror, he saw Lisa, camera in hand, documenting the entire scene. Their eyes met across the distance, and Jack saw the conflict in her expression. The journalist in her, knowing she was witnessing something monumental, while the person who had grown to care for Jack understood the danger and sensitivity of the situation. Before Jack could react, a loud crack split the air. The hillside was giving way, and the cache was sliding towards the stream. Without hesitation, Jack threw himself into the path of the sliding container, using his body to redirect its course. He managed to divert it from the water, but in doing so, he lost his footing on the slippery ground. Lisa's scream pierced the air as she watched Jack tumble down the hillside, disappearing into the darkness and rain. The military team scrambled to secure the cache and search for Jack, their powerful flashlights cutting through the gloom. For several heart-stopping minutes, there was no sign of him. Lisa found herself being held back by Colonel Bradshaw as she tried to join the search, tears mixing with the rain on her face. Then, a shout went up. Jack had been found, battered and muddy, clinging to a tree root halfway down the slope. As the team worked to rescue him, the full impact of the night's events began to sink in. The hidden cache had been exposed, not just to the military, but to Lisa and her camera. The operation's secrecy was compromised. Jack was injured, and the delicate balance of the forest had been disrupted in ways that would take years to fully understand. As Jack was pulled to safety, his eyes locked with Lisa's. In that moment, they both knew that nothing would ever be the same. The truth was out, for better or worse, and the repercussions would be far-reaching. The storm continued to rage around them, a fitting backdrop to the turmoil that was about to engulf their lives and the entire community. In the aftermath of the storm, Jack found himself at the center of a maelstrom of conflicting interests and emotions. As he recovered from his injuries in the local hospital, he was visited by Colonel Bradshaw, who wore a grim expression. "Thornton, we've got a situation on our hands," the colonel began, his voice low. "That reporter, Lisa Chen, she's got photographic evidence of the operation. We're looking at a major security breach." Jack winced, not just from his physical pain, but from the weight of the consequences looming over them. "What are you planning to do?" he asked, dreading the answer. "Standard procedure would be to confiscate her equipment and silence the story," Bradshaw replied. "But given the circumstances and your relationship with her, I'm open to alternatives. Got any ideas?" Jack's mind raced. He knew he had to find a solution that would satisfy the military's need for secrecy, respect Lisa's journalistic integrity, and most importantly, protect the forest and the community he'd sworn to serve. After a moment of contemplation, Jack spoke. "We need to bring everyone to the table. The military, Lisa, the town council, and environmental experts. We can't keep this secret anymore, but we can control how the information comes out." Bradshaw raised an eyebrow. "That's a risky play, Thornton. You sure about this?" Jack nodded firmly. "It's the only way to maintain trust and ensure the forest's protection. We need transparency, but on our terms." With Bradshaw's reluctant agreement, Jack set the plan in motion. From his hospital bed, he began making calls, arranging for a town hall meeting that would bring all parties together. The day of the meeting arrived, and the town's community center was packed to capacity. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. Jack, still moving gingerly from his injuries, took the podium, facing the sea of familiar and new faces. "Friends, neighbors, members of the press," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "We're here today to address the rumors and bring to light a truth that has been hidden in our forest for decades." Over the next hour, Jack, with support from Colonel Bradshaw, revealed the story of the hidden weapons caches, the Cold War operation, and the recent efforts to safely remove these dangerous relics. He emphasized the delicate balance between national security, environmental protection, and the public's right to know. Lisa, sitting in the front row, listened intently, her reporter's notebook open but untouched. She had agreed to hear everything before publishing her story, a testament to the trust she and Jack had built. As Jack concluded his presentation, he opened the floor for questions. The room erupted with voices, concerns ranging from environmental impact to property values to national security. Jack, Colonel Bradshaw, and a panel of experts addressed each question as honestly as they could. One of the most poignant moments came when an elderly resident stood up. "I've lived here all my life," she said, her voice quavering. "How do we know our homes, our water, our children are safe?" Jack stepped forward, his eyes meeting the woman's. "Ma'am, I give you my word that we are doing everything in our power to ensure the safety of this community and the integrity of the forest. That's why we're here today, to work together and find the best path forward." As the meeting progressed, a sense of collaborative problem-solving began to emerge. The town council proposed the formation of a joint task force, including military personnel, environmental experts, and community representatives to oversee the continued removal of the caches and the restoration of affected areas. Lisa, when given the opportunity to speak, surprised everyone with her proposal. "I have evidence that could sensationalize this story," she admitted. "But I believe there's a more important story here, one of community resilience, environmental stewardship, and reconciliation with our past. I want to document this process, showing how we can come together to overcome even the most extraordinary challenges." Her words seemed to shift the atmosphere in the room. The fear and anger began to give way to a cautious sense of unity and purpose. As the meeting drew to a close, Jack found himself surrounded by a mix of military personnel, townspeople, and environmental activists, all eager to be part of the solution. He caught Lisa's eye across the room, and they shared a small smile, acknowledging the long road ahead but feeling hopeful for the first time in weeks. Colonel Bradshaw approached Jack, shaking his head in disbelief. "I've got to hand it to you, Thornton. I didn't think this could work, but you might have just pulled off a miracle here." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "It's a start," he said. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but at least now we're all on the same page." As the crowd began to disperse, Jack knew that this was just the beginning. The conflict wasn't fully resolved, but a framework for resolution had been established. The real test would come in the days and weeks ahead as they worked to implement their plans and rebuild trust. With a deep breath, Jack stepped out of the community center into the sunlight, ready to face the challenges ahead. Not just as a ranger, but as a bridge between the military, the town, and the forest he had always called home. In the weeks following the town hall meeting, a palpable shift occurred in the atmosphere of the small community. The veil of secrecy had been lifted, replaced by a new sense of purpose and collaboration. Jack found himself at the center of this transformation, his role evolving from that of a solitary ranger to a crucial liaison between various stakeholders. The Joint Task Force, born out of the meeting, began its work in earnest. Military personnel worked alongside environmental experts and local volunteers, meticulously combing the forest for remaining caches while taking great care to minimize their impact on the ecosystem. Jack's expertise proved invaluable as he guided the teams through the terrain, his intimate knowledge of the forest helping to expedite the process while protecting sensitive areas. Lisa, true to her word, began documenting the entire operation, Her articles, published regularly in the local paper and picked up by national outlets, painted a nuanced picture of a community coming together to confront its hidden past and forge a new future. Her writing skillfully balanced the gravity of the situation with hopeful narratives of cooperation and environmental stewardship. As the work progressed, an unexpected benefit emerged. The carefully managed revelation of the forest's secrets led to a surge of interest in local history and conservation efforts. Schools organized educational trips to safe zones of the forest, where students learned about ecology alongside lessons on Cold War history. The town began to embrace its unique story, seeing it as an opportunity for growth and education rather than a shameful secret. For Jack, this period marked a profound personal and professional turning point. He found himself not just protecting the forest, but also helping to reshape the community's relationship with it. His role expanded to include public speaking engagements, where he shared his passion for conservation and the importance of understanding and respecting the land's history. One crisp autumn morning, as Jack stood at the edge of a clearing watching a team carefully excavate a newly discovered cache, he felt a presence beside him. It was Lisa, her camera hanging around her neck, a notebook in hand. "You know," she said, her eyes scanning the scene before them, "when I first stumbled upon this story, I thought it was about secrets and danger. But now I see it's really about redemption and hope." Jack nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "It's about the forest," he said softly. "It's always been about the forest and our place in it." As they stood there watching the past being carefully unearthed and the future taking shape, Jack realized that his life's work had taken on a new, broader meaning. He was no longer just a protector of the wilderness, but a guardian of its stories and a guide towards a more conscious, connected future. As the operation to clear the forest of its hidden caches neared completion, Jack found himself perched on a familiar outcropping, gazing out over the vast expanse of trees. The forest, which had once seemed like a realm of endless mysteries, now felt different. Not diminished, but transformed. Its secrets shared, its stories intertwined with those of the community in new and profound ways. Jack reflected on his own journey over the past months. He had entered this ordeal as a solitary figure, a guardian operating on the fringes of society. Now he found himself at the heart of a community effort, his role expanded beyond anything he could have imagined. The challenges had changed him. He was no longer just the gruff, taciturn ranger, but a leader, a mediator, and a voice for both the forest and the town. His experiences had taught him the value of transparency, the strength found in collaboration, and the power of facing the past to build a better future. His relationship with Lisa had deepened as well. What had begun as a tense standoff between a secretive ranger and a probing journalist had blossomed into a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and a growing affection. Jack smiled as he thought of their late-night conversations, debating the ethics of their actions and dreaming of the forest's future. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Jack heard footsteps approaching. He turned to see Colonel Bradshaw making his way up the trail, looking more relaxed than Jack had ever seen him. "Quite a view," the colonel remarked, settling down next to Jack. Jack nodded. "It never gets old." They sat in companionable silence for a moment before Bradshaw spoke again. "You know, Thornton, when we started this operation, I thought you were going to be our biggest obstacle. A tree hugger getting in the way of national security," he chuckled softly. "I've never been so glad to be wrong." Jack felt a surge of pride at the colonel's words. "I learned a lot too," he admitted, "about seeing the bigger picture, about the complexities of keeping people safe." "You've done good work here," Bradshaw continued. "The way you brought everyone together, found a solution that worked for all sides. It's impressive. The brass up in Washington is taking notice." Jack raised an eyebrow, curious about what the colonel was implying. Bradshaw turned to face him directly. "They're talking about expanding this model to other sites, other communities facing similar issues. They want you involved, Thornton. Your expertise, your approach, it could make a real difference on a national scale." The weight of the colonel's words settled on Jack. The idea of leaving his beloved forest, of taking on a larger role, was both exhilarating and terrifying. He thought of the community he'd helped build, of Lisa, of the trees that had been his constant companions for so long. I'll need some time to think about it, Jack said finally. Bradshaw nodded, understanding. Of course, it's a big decision, but whatever you choose, you should be proud of what you've accomplished here. As the colonel made his way back down the trail, Jack turned his gaze back to the forest. He realized that the growth he'd experienced, the lessons he'd learned, had prepared him for this moment. Whether he chose to stay and continue his work here or to take his experiences to a larger stage, he was no longer just a solitary ranger. He was part of something bigger, a movement towards understanding, conservation, and community. The forest had always been his teacher, and now it had given him perhaps its greatest lesson, that growth often means expanding one's horizons, and that sometimes protecting what you love means embracing change. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared in the sky, Jack stood up, ready to head back to town. He had a lot to think about, and he knew just the person he wanted to discuss it with. With a smile, he started down the trail, eager to share his thoughts with Lisa and to hear her perspective. The path ahead was uncertain, but Jack felt ready to face whatever challenges it might bring. He had grown, not just as a ranger or a leader, but as a person, and no matter where his journey took him next, he knew that the lessons of the forest, of resilience, adaptation, and interconnectedness, would always be with him. As Jack made his way back through the familiar trails, now bustling with the activity of researchers, conservationists, and curious visitors, he felt a profound sense of accomplishment and purpose. The forest, once a silent keeper of dangerous secrets, had become a living classroom, a testament to the power of transparency, collaboration, and respect for nature. The theme that had emerged throughout this journey, the delicate balance between progress and preservation, between the needs of humanity and the rights of nature, crystallized in Jack's mind. He realized that his story, and the story of this forest, was a microcosm of the larger challenges facing the world. Reaching the edge of the town, Jack paused, looking back at the expanse of green that had shaped his life. He knew that whatever decision he made about his future, the lessons learned here would guide him. The importance of bridging divides, of finding common ground between seemingly opposing forces, and of always striving to protect the natural world while acknowledging human needs. These were universal truths that extended far beyond the boundaries of this forest. As he spotted Lisa waiting for him at the ranger station, a warm smile on her face, Jack felt a surge of optimism. Together, they had helped write a new chapter in the story of this land and its people. And while challenges would always arise, Jack was confident that with understanding, compassion, and a deep respect for the interconnectedness of all things, solutions could be found. The forest had offered up its secrets, and in doing so, had revealed a path forward, not just for this community, but as a model for facing the complex environmental and social issues of our time.